GOP congressional advisor and founder of Relaxed Strategies. Rina, I want to start with you because it does feel like Trump and Republicans are giving Democrats quite a bit to work with. How's your party doing with that?
Well, they are going to hopefully not put their feet in their mouth on this one. And I'll tell you, this is always the problem with Republicans because they can get trapped with this character, right? Then the character is the 3 C's of corruption, cruelty, and chaos. But what they need to do is counter with a message of economic growth. There are working families like mine where you've got a mother and a father both out there and young kids that have to become latchkey. How are they going to be talked to? They won't be, they'll be lost. Let me put it this way. If Republicans don't say, you know what, we need to talk to the middle class better, and they're not doing it right now, because what this bill does is really says we have to defend it every day of the week. And that, I think, as a political strategist, is always really a defeating moment, because then they buy into the Capitol Hill talking points. And this next midterms, not going to be one of those Capitol Hill talking points.
I mean, Ameshia, it seems like the Republican Party, they don't care about the middle class or the working class, just by looking at this reconciliation bill, where a massive shift of the resources from you know, the bottom of the economic ladder to the top of the economic ladder.
No, you're absolutely right. And I think that one of the things that the Republicans messaged well in the last campaign cycle in 2024 was that a lot of this was about people's feelings, not necessarily what the reality was on paper. What we know now is that people's feelings and reality are the same. They have met. They're saying they cannot afford housing. They're saying they cannot afford health care. They're saying they cannot afford higher education to send their kids to school. They're saying they cannot afford a system that totally gets rid of public schools in favor of a voucher system that doesn't allow for students with disabilities or others to actually attend those schools. So I think that what we're seeing is people who are watching what Trump ran on, that working class values, helping those families who were hurting. They're watching that dissipate by a bill that he went and knocked on people's doors and talked about. Because mind you, reconciliation was having a really hard time getting across the finish line until Donald Trump met with those leaders and actually pushed it. And all it is a big win for the wealth class, the yacht class, and big losers are the working class and middle class America.
Rina, at the beginning of the administration, the first couple of months, Elon Musk was such a presence in Washington and at Trump's side. And one thing you would hear was that congressional Republicans were scared of Elon primarying them if they didn't go along exactly with the nominees. Some of the contentious, terrible, unqualified nominees like Pete Hegseth.
Right.
So now, though, Elon is saying he's going to pull back on his spending after kind of having a bust in Wisconsin after wasting $20 million there. Do you think that that is going to give congressional Republicans any breathing room?
I'm not sure about breathing room, but let's be very clear about why Elon is doing this, too, not just because of the tremendous loss of money, but because he also doesn't love Trump's trade war either. He's not benefiting here. So Elon is kind of looking at this first 100 days saying, maybe I made a mark here. And maybe he did want to scare some people, but I don't think he's really that much of a long-term thinker. He's very short-term. He's very thinking, what's my win and where, and was that money well spent or not? Now, congressional Republicans obviously are breathing some degree of, breathing a sigh of relief, but they know that he's not fully out of the picture. They know that big business will remain. They know that Elon's influence goes wherever Trump goes. That means abroad and also benefits from where the Trump family benefits, Musk family benefits. So nothing has really changed. We can say, yeah, pull out the money, but Wisconsin was very different. I think it was voters coming up, even in the rural areas, and understanding what a far-right judiciary in that state would do to them. That's what voters need to sense over and over again, because Democrats are banking on outrage, but outrage doesn't win elections.
I don't know about that, because it's won Donald Trump a couple elections.
A couple of elections. A couple of elections, Lord knows. They gave breath to MAGA.
Yeah, and I mean, the damage on Elon may already be done, right? You kind of alluded to that, right? That he's been around for this 100 whatever days in the election, and you have Democrats seething, getting excited to be able to use him as a cudgel for Republicans, whether or not he's actually still working in the government or not, because he's still going to be whispering in Donald Trump's ear.
No, absolutely. And Democrats can't get too excited here, because the Democrats polling right now is lower than both Elon Musk and Doge. So they're in the hole in and of themselves that they have to dig out of. But with that being said, Elon Musk is not out of the picture, and he quite frankly never will be. What I think he's doing here is two things. One, we saw the pushback with Tesla. We saw him decide that he's going to step down. We've also seen him understand that his value is in his coin, not necessarily in his presence.
Correct.
Him going to stomp in Wisconsin and hold those rallies, he learned learned very quickly that this was at the backdrop of all the Doge cuts. This was at the backdrop of people knowing and pinpointing him as someone who was hurting them. His actual presence, and he's not a political guy. He's a money man. He's a guy who cares about his wallet. He's a guy who's the biggest welfare queen in America because he's benefited from those things. However, this is a guy who is not politically strategic, and I think that that's what he's trying to do here.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, we can go to West Point now because this is a little bit of a lighter topic.
Okay.
So President Trump gave the commencement address at West Point yesterday. He also did in 2020, and there's some conversation that maybe Donald Trump should have stood in the receiving line and do a handshake with every cadet.
Well,
So
the conversation is because the DoD Rapid Response posted on X earlier this week. They praised VP J.D. Vance for being a leader and shaking candidates' hands. They said, "It's nice to have a leader like @VP who can stand for hours just to honor the accomplishments of our newest officers." He literally is shaking every single hand.
So I looked it up, and in 2020, Trump got out of the handshake when he spoke at West Point because of coronavirus.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
So he dodged that. He dodged because he's a germaphobe. He doesn't like the handshake. I kind of am sympathetic on this one. I think it's maybe though he could have stood in the receiving line and said hi to everyone.
But I mean, when President Biden gave the same speech, he stood. This man that everybody said was so old and was barely alive stood there and shook everybody.
Absolutely.
I wonder if the president,
You can say
President
hi.
Trump is.
The other thing is he's just disrespectful.
I'm a
He's
germaphobe
disrespectful to the uniform.
But stand there and say hi.
He's disrespectful to the uniform. He doesn't care.
Does it matter? Do people?
I think Larry
is this
David
something
would
people
agree.
care about?
Couldn't even watch that speech, to be honest. I mean, what they saw was
That's
the
what I was
MAGA hat. It was rambling. It was just rambling about nonsense. And I wanted to watch it. I'm listening there to say, what's the commander-in-chief going to say to the next generation of people that are bravely putting on our uniform, right?
He told them that they need trophy wives.
Right? It wasn't a military. It was no big picture military doctrine or grand strategy. It was trophy wives. It can go.
And it's a Trump strategy because that's what they think works. They think that all praise to the leader who is the overarching leader of everything. They're wrong on that, right? What he really could have done is talked about some solutions when these men and women go out into society and say, hey, we want to contribute to this country in other ways, but what's this country going to do for us? I didn't hear any of that.
He can't have that conversation while he's dismantling government at the same time. He can't have that conversation while he is actively working to eradicate healthcare and housing for those who return after they've completed their service and duty. He can't have that conversation because he knows nothing about wearing the uniform. He never has. But he's also someone who, quite frankly, does not respect those who do.
Well, it's a very different conversation when he had to pivot all the time from jobs and stability and economy to really making the case as to why he loves this country. We really don't hear that as much. And that makes every Republican sitting in this building their job so much harder. And I think that's the challenge that Republicans are facing in this moment, is a president that is constantly off script, not taking the wins he could take on the weeks he could take them. And I always say Trump takes 3 steps forward and 4 steps back. So I hope we see a change, but I'm not optimistic.
What?
Yeah.
No.
Ameshia, what would you advise Democrats? Pick 3 things. I'll give you 3 things. What should they run on for the midterm?
3 is such a short list.
I know.
Definitely, they've got to run on Medicaid. Medicaid is huge. We have so many people who are going to face not being insured at all. They've got to stick to the kitchen table issues. I would go Medicaid. I would also go in on children, child care, and education. And lastly, the importance of our country remaining who and what we are. This is a president who has not only set our Constitution on fire, he's challenging the courts. Every check and balance that exists, he is someone who does not believe in it, turning our country into something that we have never seen.
Can we shift gears here and talk about Senator Federman of Pennsylvania? We had the former Congresswoman, Pennsylvania Congressman Connor Lamb on, and we asked him about the stories about John Fetterman not showing up for work, not having the oomph to show up. Watch what he had to say. We'll talk about it.
What we would like to see is John step up to the plate for those people the way he did when he used to campaign. But instead, you only ever really hear from him when he's complaining about the media or talking about Israel or things that, are just kind of far from like what's putting food on the table for the average person in the state. So he has a lot of time left in his term, in which I honestly hope that he becomes a better advocate for people in this state because they deserve better.
I mean, Ameshia, that was You only ever really hear from him when he's complaining.
I mean, it's honest. At the end of the day, I think that what we have to do, knowing that midterms are coming up, is restructure the conversation, making sure that the economy is put first, making sure that people know that affordability, lack of affordability is being led by this presidency and the Republican-led Congress, but also that Trump has a very good game of running the media wild and making them chase his tail. At the end of the day, he will try to create a distraction. Do not let them, because you cannot afford to live.
Okay.
Yeah, but I think I just have to go back to Fetterman.
Yeah.
Because I think it's a ticking time bomb for Democrats.
Well, sure.
I think that he could easily switch over to becoming a Republican and talk about what that would ignite in Washington within the party. And
He said he won't.
He says
do
he
that.
won't, but and you know who else faced this same speculation of party switching? Joe Manchin, of West Virginia. He never
Kirsten
switched.
Sinema, but they
Y'all
Right,
know
but-
the Manchin seat. We never talk about Senator Jim Justice, my home state's former governor, who switched parties as well, who never shows up to vote, flies in on his private jet
Wait, he
with
doesn't
baby
show up to
dog.
vote?
Yeah, come on
With
now.
baby
it's a well-known
dog.
thing here. You know, this problem is Democrat and Republican. I don't know why we want to act like Fetterman's some sort of anomaly here. There are numerous people sitting in that building that only show up to vote and really try to speak only to the interests of their area. I'm Southern West Virginia, born and raised. People there love Jim Justice. I went to school in the north of West Virginia, up where I was spending a lot of my summers in Pennsylvania. People love Senator Fetterman. What are we fighting about here? We need to make sure all these people, whether they're right, left, center, whatever they want to call themselves, are talking about the blunt economic tools that the Trump administration is using on everyday Americans, like tariffs.
Just show up for work. That's all.
That's a minimum.
show up. Okay, so Ameshia Cross, Rina Shah, thank you so much for being with us. This was a really fun conversation.